Hey neighbor, welcome back to 7 on Sunday, your weekly dose of music countdowns. My name is John, and today's theme is cover songs that became more famous than the original. Hate to ask so early on, but YouTube has really been doing me dirty with pushing out these videos that require a lot of work, so pretty please take a quick second to like this video and leave a comment for the algorithm. Plus it's the last episode of SOS being filmed in this house after 5.5 years, so if anything deserves a like, it's this one. With each pick, I'll pinpoint some of the key identities separating the songs. Were both versions well known? Did one change up the mood with a full-on 180? Ultimately, I'll pick a winner battle royale style, but I do at the very least enjoy both versions of everything here. There's a Spotify playlist linked below so you can listen along after the video, so let's get into this episode of 7 on Sunday. Talk Talk were a synth-pop and new wave band from the UK that gained a pretty large level of success during the 80s and early 90s. The average listener today would probably name somebody completely different if you walked up to them and said, "Who wrote that song, It's My Life?" Well, you might get some other answers that are technically accurate, like Bon Jovi, since it's a pretty common song title, but no doubt made the list at number 7 for their cover of Talk Talk's most popular song. This cover saw Gwen Stefani and the band paying tribute to the original without changing too much of the DNA. She didn't try to go insane with the vocals, nor did the boys rip away the shimmering synths for a trip to Ska Town. It's much more in line with the material they recorded for Rocksteady in 2001, and was their final studio release for nearly a decade before Push and Shove. It's My Life lands at number 7 since the original is still super commendable for its ongoing popularity in certain countries, but I'd argue No Doubt's version surpassed Talk Talk's due to their global stardom in the early 2000s when you couldn't not be aware of who they are. Gwen and company record a song hits the charts, simple as that, success. In a head-to-head battle, they're both amazing in their own way, but I'm gonna have to give the slight edge to the original track. Mark Hollis's voice is chilling, but calm and confident at the same time. Plus the synth work is iconic. The decades just keep rolling by, but they keep sounding that much sweeter.
I find it kinda sad, the dreams in which I'm dying are the best I've ever had.
In sports, they'd call this the upset of the century. I don't think anyone could have predicted the second coming of Mad World at the hands of a cult classic independent film about a teenager having visions of a rabbit named Frank. But then again, look at the title of the damn song! Tears for Fears are a very well-known band from the UK, talented as they are electric, and I love them, but 9 times out of 10, your average music fan would probably name-check Everybody Wants to Rule the World or shout when told to name a song. Mad World was popular, of course, but it never quite topped the charts in their home country, nor did it get heavy airplay around the world. This was all in the early 80s, with the original cut being something much more vivacious, with heavy uses of synth and danceable rhythms, despite the extremely crushing sadness hinted at in the writing. Move forward a few decades to 2001 and we see the birth of not only the beloved indie flick Donnie Darko starring a young Jake Gyllenhaal, but also its destined to be iconic soundtrack featuring a Mad World cover by Michael Andrews and Gary Jules. This cover slowly became the definitive version, and as the sleeper hit Donnie Darko rose in fame, so did this new version of Mad World. Andrew and Gary's twist eventually bested Tears for Fears' chart success, hitting number 1 in the UK for 3 weeks in late 2003. I think people really felt a striking connection to this chilling piano version. It's stunning, and it never fails to share this isolated, reflective state of mind. Taking it to the head-to-head battle, I'm gonna hand it to Gary Jules and Michael Andrews by way of technical, emotional knockout. Dylan's 1973 single Knockin' on Heaven's Door was originally known for being a part of his soundtrack to a Western film, but it took on a life of its own through the process of touring, usage in popular media of the time, and of course through dozens of cover versions, with the most famous of those being done by the hard rockers Guns N' Roses. The band started off by playing the song at their concerts, turning it into a sprawling hard rock ballad with some dizzying guitar gusto from Slash, and of course Axl Rose wailing away with his signature pipes to make this quite the distinct rendition. It became so popular with fans, they included a live version as the B-side to their Welcome to the Jungle single in 1987, later recording an official studio version for their insanely popular album Use Your Illusion 2 in 1991. Take this with a grain of salt since I'm not that big on Bob Dylan, but I have to give it to Guns N' Roses in the head-to-head face-off. Dylan's creation is an immersive experience that explores the parallels between his own life to that of the movie he penned it for, but Axl and company made this quintessentially theirs as they topped charts all around the world with an epic cover that roared on for 3 minutes longer than its original counterpart.
Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool. Why don't you come on over, Valerie?
Valerie is one of the biggest examples out there when it comes to cover songs towering in popularity over the original. The late great Amy Winehouse teamed up with producer Mark Ronson for a soulful take on the 2006 single by the indie band the Zutons, impacting charts all around the world, first as a bonus track on her final album Back to Black, before really blowing up as an up-tempo edit on Ronson's Motown Covers album version. It's not that the Zutons were some completely unknown band, but their success was mainly limited to England, while Amy's adaptation is still widely known. But that feeling of being overshadowed was, of course, a weird one for the original songwriter Dave McCabe of the Zutons, given that he wrote this song out of nowhere in the back of a cab in 20 minutes for a friend across the pond. The feeling of having to live up to those unbelievable expectations fucked with his confidence as a musician, with McCabe telling The Independent in 2011, "I certainly have to try hard sometimes to not think about Valerie. The days when it's in my head or when I have to put down the guitar and just forget about writing." At the end of the day, both versions are a blast to listen to. It's a feel-good song about opening the door to a friend either way you spin it, so give it up for the Zutons for their spirited guitar-driven production. However, when it boils down to the head-to-head battle, I've gotta give the slight edge to Amy Winehouse and Mark Ronson for the simple fact that it's not just the one recorded version. This is a tricky one because its story begins before the two primary versions we know today. Twist and Shout is an instantly recognizable smash, but it wasn't written by the Beatles, and it wasn't even written by the Isley brothers, although they without a doubt deserve the as made famous by tag since their 1962 cover was the first to gain notoriety. The Dynamite Shaker was written in 1961 by two songwriters Phil Medley and Burt Russell, with the pair originally giving Twist and Shout to the R&B vocal group The Top Notes, who recorded it soon after. It wasn't successful at all. In fact, a lot of people involved had regrets with how the production sounded, but the Isley brothers recorded it a year later and gave it that unshakable soul it was always meant to have. Hey, the Isley brothers are very well known. I bet you've at least heard the name, and if not, then here's your wake-up call. But when you're competing against the single most legendary band of all time, a name that you practically walk out of the womb knowing, then I guess you lose out on having the most popular version. Head-to-head battle, call me basic, but I grew up loving the Beatles and dancing to this song like so many other millions did. I can't help myself, this version wins out easily. John Lennon's raw, frantic vocals capture the scope of what the Isleys made famous, and he did that on the first take, but with more of a rock and roll oomph to make it really sound like a fountain of youth.
My love on a wire, lift you up every time.
I'm seriously jazzed right now because this is what gave me the idea for this episode in the first place, and literally 1 week before I filmed this, 11 years after the release of one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, came out, the Brie Larson cover of Metric's Black Sheep from the soundtrack finally got an official release on streaming. So take it back a second, even if you're not familiar with Scott Pilgrim, I bet you'd at least recognize the name Brie Larson. Captain Marvel herself recorded a full vocal cover for the film, but the full song wasn't used, of course, for the movie because it's a movie and they're probably gonna cut it up and use certain parts that serve the current scene. The Canadian rock band Metric wrote Black Sheep and were ultimately awarded the soundtrack spot over Larson since that's what they wanted at the time. In theory, I get that, you wrote it so you get the placement. Brie's character Envy was even modeled after their lead singer Emily Haynes. But no official release for Brie Larson's Black Sheep was like swallowing razor blades for the fans who argued that both could have been given a spot, and they're totally right. Anyone with the slightest eye for marketing could have seen the growing cult status of Scott Pilgrim, its soundtrack, its comics, the star-studded cast. How do you wait 11 years to fully cash in?
Sweet. Coins.
Metric crafted a song with grungy vocal textures and live wire guitars that came to life alongside their signature web of dark electronics. It's an amazing tune, always a blast to hear and one of the best from a massively slept on band worth loving, but it still isn't on the level of Brie Larson singing Black Sheep. It's a weird rabbit hole to fall down since the instrumental remains almost entirely unchanged, but this time it feels sassier thanks to the actress's suave, playful singing. It makes the head-to-head battle really strange since they are so similar, but to me, the clear winner, Mr. Pilgrim, is Brie Larson with the KO! Basically, I'm in lesbians with this cover. Topping the countdown today is a song I didn't know was a cover until very recently. I would be more disappointed in myself, but I found tons of others who also had that super rude awakening, so I'm now considering it my life's quest to spread the word. I Love Rock and Roll isn't a Joan Jett original, your life is a lie! The band Arrows were the original authors, specifically their frontman Alan Merrill, who wrote the song in response to the Rolling Stones' 1974 hit, It's Only Rock and Roll. Their stern rocker felt destined to be a bar favorite, something that you'd toss on to get the crowd drunkenly clapping, singing, and roaring, but that didn't happen until a few years down the road. A young legend named Joan Jett started covering it at concerts with her band the Blackhearts, eventually taking it to the studio for a version that topped the Hot 100 for 7 weeks in the early 80s. That's her signature song, and it's a cover that everyone knows. She took it and owned the hell out of that thing. Whereas Arrows struggled to find the right production to punctuate the song's biting rock appeal, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts nail it. This is the rock and roll attitude personified. It's simple but played so well with those crunching riffs and gritty vocals. They crushed the original version in the head-to-head challenge, and the original isn't even bad. It's the end of an era. Don't forget to decimate that like button before you go and flip on those channel notifications. I also just wanted to take a second to say thank you to everybody that watches this show or any of my videos. You've given me way more than you can ever know, and I am extremely grateful. Shout out to my current $75 patrons Dayton, Brandon, Caleb, and Sombre Artist for their support, a few recent videos on screen, and I'll return in a new setting before you know it. Bye!